rain came down hard that night, not the gentle kind, the punishing kind, the kind that felt like the sky had decided you didn't deserve mercy anymore. Cade Harrian stood on the front porch of the house he'd lived in for 17 years, watching the door close in his face. No yelling, no screaming, just the sound of the lock clicking into place. Final. His mother didn't look at him through the window. She just turned and walked back into the warm living room, back to her new husband, back to the life she'd chosen that didn't include her son. Cade waited, maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping she'd remember that he was still her son, that he was only 17, that it was November and freezing and he had nowhere to go. She didn't come back. Behind him, his stepfather Dwight's voice cut through the door, cold, flat. Don't come back. Not angry, not emotional, just done. Cade stood there for one more moment. Then he picked up his backpack, pulled his hood over his head, and walked down the steps into the rain. The water hit him immediately. Within seconds, his hoodie was soaked through, his jeans clung to his legs. His sneakers squished with every step. But he didn't run. He didn't hurry. Where was he going to go? He had no friends who would take him in, no relatives nearby, no money saved up. Just a phone with 12% battery and $10 in his pocket. $10. Everything he had in the world. The streetlights flickered as he walked. Spokane at 1 in the morning was a different city. Empty, cold, indifferent. Cars passed him without slowing down. Nobody cared about a kid walking alone in the rain. Nobody ever had, except one person. Cade reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. Worn at the edges, faded, bent from being carried around for 7 years. His father, Owen Harrian, standing in front of an old camping trailer smiling, one hand on Cade's shoulder. Cade was 9 in that picture, maybe 10, back when things still made sense, back when he still had someone who looked at him like he mattered. Owen died when Cade was 10, March 2019, a car accident, they said. Lost control on a wet road. Crashed into a tree, gone before the ambulance arrived. That's what they told him. Cade stared at the photo for a long moment, rain dripping off the edges. Then he carefully folded it and put it back in his pocket. He kept walking. The gas station appeared about 40 minutes later, one of those old, run-down places on the edge of town that only stayed open because truckers needed somewhere to stop at odd hours. Flickering fluorescent lights, cracked pavement, a few cars parked near the pump's engines idling. Cade walked past them and sat down on the curb near the dumpsters, pulling his knees to his chest. He was cold, hungry, exhausted, and completely alone. He sat there for maybe 20 minutes trying to think, trying to come up with a plan, but his mind kept circling back to the same truth. He had nowhere to go. That's when he saw it. Parked near the edge of the lot, half hidden in the shadows behind the dumpsters, was an old RV, and not just old, ancient, rust eating through the sides, windows cracked and taped over, tires that looked like they hadn't moved in years, and taped to the side, flapping in the wind, was a handwritten sign. For sale, $10. Cade stared at it. $10, the exact amount in his pocket. He almost laughed. It was so absurd, an RV for $10. It had to be a joke, or a scam, or something worse. But he stood up anyway. He walked closer, his shoes crunching on gravel, and circled the vehicle slowly. The thing was falling apart, paint peeling off in sheets, door handle half broken, one of the side mirrors hanging by a wire. But it had walls and a roof, and right now that was more than Cade had. You looking to buy? The voice startled him. Cade turned and saw an old man stepping out from behind the RV, late 60s, maybe 70s, greasy jacket, stubble on his face, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and cared about too little. He smelled like whiskey. I don't know, Cade said carefully. Does it even run? The man shrugged. Sometimes. Cade raised an eyebrow. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it'll start, sometimes it won't. Depends on the day. The man pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit one, and took a long drag. You really selling it for $10? That's what the sign says. Why so cheap? The man looked at him for a long moment. Then he exhaled smoke and shrugged again. Because I want it gone, and nobody else wants it. There was something final in the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about the RV. Cade glanced back at the vehicle. Rust, broken windows, a door that probably didn't lock. But it was shelter, and $10 was all he had. "I'll take it," Cade said quietly. The man studied him. "You got somewhere to go, kid?" Cade didn't answer. The man nodded slowly, like that was the answer enough. "Yeah, thought so." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small set of keys. Tarnished. Old. He held them out. Cade hesitated. Then he pulled the $10 bill from his pocket. Damp from the rain, wrinkled. But it was real. He handed it over. The man took it without counting, just folded it and shoved it into his pocket. Then he pressed the keys into Cade's hand. "It's yours." Cade looked down at the keys. They felt heavier than they should have. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it." The man turned to walk away, but then he paused, looked back over his shoulder. "Kid." Cade looked up. The man's expression was unreadable. For a moment it looked like he wanted to say something important, but then he just shook his head. "Good luck." And then he was gone, walking off into the rain, disappearing into the darkness beyond the gas station lights. Cade stood there for a moment, keys in his hand, staring at the rusted RV. Then he walked to the door and pulled it open. The smell hit him first. Dust, mildew, old fabric that hadn't been cleaned in years, rust and decay, and something else he couldn't quite place. But it was dry. Cade stepped inside and pulled the door closed behind him. The rain immediately became quieter. Muffled, like the world outside had been turned down a notch. He stood there in the darkness for a moment, just breathing. Then he reached up and found a small overhead light, clicked it on. The bulb flickered. Weak, yellow, but it worked. The inside of the RV was worse than the outside. Torn seats covered in stains, cabinets hanging half off their hinges, wires dangling from the ceiling. The floor creaked under every step, and there were holes in the walls where the insulation had rotted through. But it was his. Cade dropped his backpack onto one of the torn seats and looked around. Really looked. There was a small kitchenette to his left, a sink with no faucet, a stove that definitely didn't work, cabinets with doors that hung loose. To his right, a narrow hallway led toward the back, and at the end of that hallway, barely visible in the dim light, was a door. Cade frowned. He walked toward it slowly, each step making the floor groan. The door wasn't like the rest of the RV. It didn't match. The walls around it were cheap plywood and cracked paneling, but this door was different. Metal, old but solid, heavy, and completely out of place. Cade reached out and touched it. Cold. He looked for a handle, but there wasn't one. Just a small keyhole near the center, scratched and worn like someone had tried to force it open before. He tried pushing it. It didn't budge. Pulling. Nothing. He ran his fingers along the edges looking for a latch or a hinge that might give. But the door was flush with the wall, sealed tight. "What the hell?" he muttered. Why would someone put a locked metal door inside an RV? It didn't make sense. Cade stood there for a long time, just staring at it, his mind racing, his exhaustion forgotten. Finally, he stepped back. "Tomorrow," he told himself. "I'll figure it out tomorrow." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. He went back to the front of the RV, pulled off his soaked hoodie, and sat down on one of the torn seats. He should sleep. He should rest. He should let it go. But his eyes kept drifting back to that hallway, to that door. The rain pounded against the roof all night, steady, relentless. But Cade barely heard it. He couldn't stop thinking about the door. By the time the sun came up, he hadn't slept at all. The morning was gray and cold. Cade stepped out of the RV and stretched his body stiff from sitting in the same position all night. The gas station was quieter now, just a few early morning commuters stopping for coffee. He needed food, and he needed money to buy it. Cade spent the next few hours walking around the area looking for work. Anything. He didn't care what it was. Most people ignored him. A few told him to get lost. But finally, around noon, he found a small auto shop a few blocks away. The sign out front said Martinez Auto Repair. Cade walked inside. The shop smelled like oil and metal. Tools hung on the walls. A car was up on a lift, its underside exposed. And standing beneath it, wiping his hands on a rag, was a man in his mid-40s. Broad shoulders, grease-stained shirt, kind eyes. Help you, the man asked. You need any help around here? Cade asked. I can sweep, haul stuff, whatever you need. The man studied him for a moment. You got experience? No, but I'll work hard. The man looked him up and down, took in the damp clothes, the tired eyes, the desperation barely hidden behind the words. He sighed. You hungry? Cade hesitated, then nodded. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. Clean up the back lot, organize the scrap metal, sweep the floors. Do a good job and this is yours. Cade stared at the money. Deal. He worked for 4 hours straight, sweeping, hauling, organizing. His arms ached. His back hurt. But he didn't stop. By the time he was done, the lot looked completely different. The man came out to inspect it, nodded. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. He handed Cade the 20. Cade took it like it was a lifeline. Thank you. The man shrugged. You need more work, you come back. I can always use the help. I will. Cade walked out of the shop with $20 in his pocket. It wasn't much, but it was something. He stopped at a small grocery store on the way back to the RV, bought the cheapest things he could find. Bread, peanut butter, a gallon of water. He had $3 left. When he got back to the RV, he sat down and ate slowly, making it last, trying not to think about how long this food would have to stretch. But even as he ate, his eyes kept drifting back to that hallway, to that door. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Cade stood up, walked to the back, and stood in front of the metal door again. This time he really looked at it. The scratches around the keyhole weren't random. They were deliberate, like someone had spent hours trying to pick the lock or force it open. He ran his hand along the edge of the door. That's when he noticed something. The paneling around the door wasn't flush. There was a gap, small but visible. Cade grabbed a broken piece of metal from the floor and wedged it into the gap. Then he pried. The paneling came loose, and behind it he saw something that made his breath catch. The metal door wasn't built into the RV. It was installed, retrofitted. Someone had taken the original wall out and put this in its place. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to hide whatever was behind this door. Cade stepped back, his heart pounding. He looked around the RV, really looked. If someone hid a door, maybe they hid something else. He started searching, opening cabinets, pulling up loose floorboards, checking under seats. Most of it was junk, empty wrappers, old newspapers, broken tools. But then in the kitchenette, he found something. A cabinet in the corner. The door hung at an odd angle half off its hinges. He'd ignored it before, but now he pulled it open. Inside, wedged into the back corner, was a small metal box. Cade pulled it out. It was old, rusted, but intact. He pried it open. Inside were papers, stacks of them, folded, yellowed with age. Cade unfolded the first one. It was a receipt, dated 2017, for equipment he didn't recognize. The second was a technical schematic. He didn't understand it. The third was a handwritten note, numbers, addresses. And then he saw it. At the top of one of the pages, written in block letters, Owen Harrian, lead systems engineer. Cade froze. That was his father's name. He flipped through the papers faster now, and there it was again, and again. Owen Harrian, over and over. Purchase orders, technical notes, project memos. His father's name was everywhere. Cade's hands started shaking. What the hell, he whispered. His father had been a technician. Small was repairs. That's what his mother always said. That's what everyone told him. But this was something else. He kept flipping. And then he found an address, written in red ink, circled, underlined, like it was important. 2847 Industrial Canyon Road, Spokane. It appeared 12 times across different documents. Cade stared at it. What was at that address, and why did his father's name keep showing up next to it? He pulled out his phone. 12% battery left. He typed the address into Google Maps. The result loaded slowly. When it did, Cade's stomach dropped. The address was in an industrial area on the north side of the city. The satellite image showed a large compound, warehouses, parking lots, security fencing, and in the center a modern glass building with a logo on the front. Vanguard Systems Corporation. Cade had never heard of it. He clicked on the company's website. It loaded halfway before his phone died. but he'd seen enough. His father had been connected to this company, somehow, and someone had hidden all the evidence inside this RV. Cade looked back at the locked door. Whatever was behind it, it was connected to this. It had to be. He stood up, papers in hand, and made a decision. Tomorrow he'd go to that address. He'd find out what Vanguard Systems was, and he'd find out why his father's name was all over these documents. But tonight he needed rest. Cade lay down on the torn seat, the papers clutched to his chest, and closed his eyes. For the first time in days, he felt something other than fear. He felt purpose. The next morning, Cade woke before sunrise. He stuffed the papers into his backpack, locked the RV, and started walking. The address was on the other side of the city, nearly 2 hours on foot. He didn't care. The streets were empty at this hour. Quiet. Cade kept his head down and walked fast, his breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. By the time the sun came up, he was halfway there. By 9 o'clock, he arrived. 2847 Industrial Canyon Road sat at the end of a long, wide street lined with warehouses and manufacturing plants. But it wasn't like the others. This place was different. The building was modern, sleek, glass and steel, 3 stories tall with tinted windows that reflected the morning light. A tall security fence surrounded the property, topped with cameras every 20 feet. The sign at the front gate read Vanguard Systems Corporation. Cade stopped across the street, his heart pounding. This wasn't some rundown factory. This was a high-security facility. He watched as a black sedan pulled up to the gate. The driver held up a key card. The gate slid open. The car drove through. Cade moved closer, staying on the opposite side of the street. There was a small coffee shop a block down. He walked inside, bought the cheapest thing on the menu with his last $3, and sat by the window. From there, he had a clear view of the Vanguard building. He watched. People came and went, employees in suits, delivery trucks, security guards rotating shifts. Cade pulled out a small notebook from his backpack and started writing. 7 o'clock shift change. Guards at front gate and side entrance. Key card access only. Cameras on all corners. He watched for hours. Around 2 in the afternoon, a large delivery truck pulled up to a side gate. The driver got out, spoke briefly with a guard, then drove through. The gate stayed open for maybe 10 seconds. And in those 10 seconds, Cade saw something. A hallway inside, plain concrete walls, industrial lighting, and at the far end, barely visible, a door, metal, old, different from everything around it, just like the one in the RV. Cade's breath caught. It was the same design, the same type, the same age. This wasn't a coincidence. His father had been connected to Vanguard, and whatever was behind the door in the RV, it was connected to whatever was behind that door. Cade was about to stand up when the front entrance of the building opened. A man stepped out. Mid-50s, tailored suit, gray hair, confident walk. The kind of man who owned every room he entered. Cade watched him cross the parking lot toward a black luxury car, and then something clicked. He knew that face. Cade fumbled for his backpack, pulled out the photograph of his father. The old one. The one from the camping trip. But not that side. He flipped it over. On the back, faded and nearly forgotten, was another photo. Taped there years ago. A group shot. 5 men standing in front of a construction site. His father was on the left. And on the right, younger but unmistakable, was the man who had just walked out of Vanguard. Cade's hands started shaking. He looked back up. The man was getting into his car now. The door closed. The engine started. And then just before the car pulled away, the man looked across the street, directly at the coffee shop window, directly at Cade. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, their eyes met. The man's expression didn't change, but then his mouth curved, a small smile. Not friendly, not surprised, certain. Like he'd been expecting this. Like Cade was already caught. Like this was all part of a game Cade didn't even know he was playing. Then the car pulled away, the man still smiling. Cade sat frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. That man knew his father. He was in the photo. And now he was here, running this company. Whatever his father had been involved in, this man was part of it. And he knew Cade existed. Cade stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked out of the coffee shop. He needed answers. And he wasn't going to find them by sitting around. He was going back to the RV, and he was going to open that door. Cade walked back to the RV faster than he'd come, his mind racing. That smile, that cold, knowing smile. It haunted him the entire walk back. By the time Cade reached the gas station, the sun was starting to set. The RV sat exactly where he'd left it, rusting and forgotten in the corner of the lot. But now it felt different. Now it felt important. Cade climbed inside and went straight to the back, to the hallway, to the door. He stood in front of it, breathing hard, and made a decision. He was going to open it. Tonight. He started searching the RV for anything he could use. A screwdriver, a crowbar, anything. Most of the drawers were empty, but in the far back underneath a pile of old rags, he found something. A rusty metal bar, maybe 2 feet long. Bent at one end, it wasn't much, but it would have to do. Cade carried it back to the door and wedged the bent end into the small gap between the door and the frame. Then he pulled. Nothing. He repositioned. Pulled harder. The metal groaned, but the door didn't move. Cade gritted his teeth and threw his full weight into it. The bar slipped. He stumbled backward, hitting the wall hard. "Come on," he muttered. He tried again, and again. Each time the door held firm. His hands were starting to blister. His shoulders ached, but he didn't stop. On the 7th attempt, he heard something. A crack. Small, but real. Cade repositioned the bar, aimed for the same spot, and pulled with everything he had. The crack grew louder. The metal around the lock started to bend. He pulled harder, and then with a loud snap, the lock broke. The door swung open. Cold air rushed out instantly. Not stale, not musty, cold. Like the space behind the door had been sealed for years and the temperature inside had never changed. Cade stepped back, breathing hard, staring into the darkness beyond. He grabbed the small flashlight he'd found earlier in one of the cabinets, clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, and what he saw made him freeze. It wasn't a normal room, it was a compartment. Small, maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, but it was organized, deliberately, carefully. Shelves lined the walls, metal, industrial, and on those shelves were boxes, files, equipment. This wasn't storage. This was a hiding place. Cade stepped inside slowly, his flashlight sweeping across the space. The air was cold enough that he could see his breath. The walls were lined with some kind of insulation, soundproofing maybe, or temperature control. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to preserve whatever was in here. Cade moved to the nearest shelf and pulled down a folder. He opened it. Inside were documents, technical schematics, blueprints, pages and pages of diagrams and specifications for something he didn't understand. But at the top of every page was the same header, Project Phantom Grid, and beneath it, in smaller text, Vanguard Systems Corporation, classified. Cade's heart started pounding. He flipped through the pages. Most of it was technical jargon, engineering terms, equations, but there were notes in the margins, handwritten, in a script he recognized, his father's handwriting. Cade pulled down another folder, then another. They were all the same, Project Phantom Grid, Vanguard Systems. His father's notes scrawled across every page. "What were you working on, Dad?" Cade whispered. He kept searching. On the bottom shelf, pushed into the far corner, was a small locked case, metal, heavy, with a combination lock on the front. Cade pulled it out and set it on the floor. He tried the lock. It didn't budge. A combination lock, 3 digits. He thought for a moment. Then he tried something. 0, 7, 1, 5, July 15th, his birthday. The lock clicked open. Cade stared at it, his hands trembling. His father had locked this case, and he'd set the combination to Cade's birthday. Like he'd known, like he'd planned for this. Cade lifted the lid. Inside were 2 things. The first was a small device, custom-built, about the size of a USB drive, but thicker, with a small screen on one side and a port on the other. The second was a piece of paper, folded, worn. Cade picked up the paper carefully and unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable, his father's. Cade's vision blurred as he read, "Cade, if you're reading this, then I couldn't keep you out of this. I'm sorry, I tried. I tried to protect you. But if you found this, it means they've come for me. And it means you're in danger too." Cade's hands shook. "Vanguard is building something that should not exist." Project Phantom Grid, it's a surveillance system, but not like anything you've seen. It uses directed energy to monitor brain activity, to read thoughts, to track intentions. They're calling it predictive security, but it's control, pure and simple. Cade's breath caught. I discovered they were testing it on civilians, without consent, in Seattle, Portland, Spokane, hundreds of people. And when I tried to stop it, they threatened me, told me to stay quiet, to take the money and walk away. The words blurred. Cade blinked hard. I couldn't, so I stole the data. Everything, all the proof, it's on the drive. Encrypted, military grade. I was going to take it to the FBI, to Agent Catherine Webb. She's clean, the only one I trust. Cade's chest tightened. But if you're reading this, I didn't make it. They got to me first. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry I left this for you. But you're the only one I can trust now. The next line was underlined, twice. Get the drive to Catherine Webb, FBI Seattle Field Office. She'll know what to do. Cade's eyes burned. They'll come for you. They'll come for the drive. Don't trust anyone at Vanguard. Don't trust anyone who tells you this is for the greater good. It's not. It's control, and it needs to stop. The letter ended with 4 words, finish what I started. And below that in his father's familiar script, I love you, Dad. Cade sat there on the cold floor of the hidden compartment, the letter in his hands, tears streaming down his face. His father hadn't died in a car accident. He'd been killed, murdered, for trying to do the right thing. Cade wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and looked at the device, the drive. This was what his father had died for, the proof, the evidence, and now it was in Cade's hands. He carefully placed the drive in his pocket. Then he folded the letter and put it in his backpack. He stood up and looked around the compartment one last time. There were more files, more documents, but he couldn't carry it all. He grabbed what looked most important, technical specs, financial records, anything with his father's handwriting. Then he stepped out of the compartment and back into the RV. He closed the broken door as best he could and sat down. He needed to get this drive to the FBI, to Catherine Webb, but he didn't know where the FBI office was. He had no money for a bus, no way to call. He was 17, alone, with evidence that powerful people had killed for, and they already knew he existed, that man at Vanguard, that smile. Cade needed to think. But before he could formulate a plan, he heard something outside. The sound of car engines. Multiple vehicles pulling into the gas station lot. Cade moved to the window and looked out carefully. 2 black SUVs, sleek, expensive. They parked near the RV. Cade's stomach dropped. The doors opened. 4 men stepped out. Dark suits, earpieces, moving with military precision. They were here for him. One of them walked directly toward the RV. Cade grabbed his backpack and looked around frantically. The front door was the only exit, and they were blocking it. He moved to the back, to the window above the bed. Small, cracked, but it opened. Outside, he heard footsteps on gravel, then a knock on the RV door. Firm, professional. We know you're in there. Open up. We just want to talk. The voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. Cade didn't answer. He climbed onto the bed and pushed the window open. It stuck halfway. He pushed harder. Another knock. Last chance. Open the door. The window finally gave. Cade squeezed through his backpack, catching on the frame. He pulled hard and tumbled out onto the pavement. He hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Behind him, he heard the RV door being forced open. Then shouting, "He's not here. Check the back." He went out the window, south side. Move. Cade sprinted across the parking lot, weaving between cars. He heard footsteps behind him. Fast. Gaining. He cut left, diving between 2 parked trucks. Ran along the side of the gas station building. A chain-link fence blocked his path. Cade didn't slow down. He jumped, grabbed the top, and hauled himself over. His hands scraped against the metal. He landed on the other side and kept running. Behind him, voices. He's heading east. Cut him off at the next block. An engine roared to life. They were getting back in the SUVs. Cade ran harder. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. He cut through an alley between 2 warehouses, jumped another fence. emerged into a different industrial lot. He dove behind a dumpster and pressed himself against the wall, gasping for air. The sound of the SUVs grew louder, then stopped. Car doors opened. Footsteps. Cade held his breath. The footsteps moved closer, slow, methodical. A flashlight beam swept across the ground near his hiding spot. Cade pressed himself flatter against the wall. The beam moved away. Nothing here. Keep looking, he can't have gone far. The footsteps moved past. Cade waited, counted to 60, then slowly, carefully, he peeked around the edge of the dumpster. The men were 50 yards away now, still searching, but moving in the wrong direction. Cade slipped out and ran the opposite way. Quiet, low. He ran for another 10 minutes before he finally stopped. He was in a part of the city he didn't recognize. Older, run down, streetlights flickering. But he was alone. Cade collapsed against a wall, chest heaving, and pulled the drive from his pocket. It was still there, still safe. He'd made it. For now, he couldn't go back to the RV. They knew about it. He had nowhere to sleep, nowhere to go. He was on his own. Cade stayed in that alley for hours, waiting, watching. When he was finally sure, he started moving again. He needed to access the drive, and he needed a way to get it to the FBI without walking into a trap. But first, he needed a computer. Cade walked through the dark streets until he found what he was looking for. A public library, small, old, tucked between a closed pawn shop and a laundromat. The windows were dark. It was closed for the night, but Cade didn't need it open. He circled to the back, found a window. It was locked, but the frame was old, rotted. He wedged his fingers under the edge and pulled. The wood splintered. The window gave. Cade climbed inside. The library was dark, silent. Cade moved carefully. He found the computer section. 6 terminals sat against the wall, all powered down. He sat at the one farthest from the entrance and turned it on. The screen glowed to life. Cade pulled the drive from his pocket. He plugged it into the USB port. The computer recognized it immediately. A window popped up. Encrypted drive detected. Enter password. Cade stared at the blinking cursor. He tried his birthday. 071506, access denied. He tried his father's birthday, access denied. He tried the date his father died, access denied. Cade leaned back frustrated. His father wouldn't have made it impossible. He would have left a clue. Cade pulled out the letter and read it again, carefully, and then he saw it, at the very bottom, below the signature. So faint he'd almost missed it. Numbers, written in pencil, barely visible. 3, 1, 5, 2, 0, 1, 9. March 15th, 2019, the day his father died. Cade's hands shook as he typed it in. The screen flickered. Access granted. Files appeared, hundreds of them, thousands, videos, documents, emails, photographs, financial records. Cade clicked on the first video file. It loaded slowly, then started playing. The footage was grainy, handheld, but clear enough. A white room, medical equipment, and in the center a man sitting in a chair, electrodes attached to his head, wires running to a machine. A voice spoke from off-screen, clinical, cold. Subject 12, baseline established, initiating phantom grid pulse. Mark. There was a sound, low, almost subsonic, a hum that seemed to vibrate through the speakers. The man in the chair tensed, his eyes went wide. Then his expression changed. Blank, empty. Subject is responsive, the voice said. Thought pattern delta detected. Compliance confirmed. Proceeding with directive implantation. The voice paused, then gave a command. Stand up. The man stood. Sit down. He sat, walked to the door. He walked, like a puppet. Cade felt sick. The video ended, another one started automatically. This one showed a larger room, a dozen people in chairs, all connected to the same type of equipment. The voice again. Mass compliance test, Seattle location. All subjects exhibiting directive response. 0 resistance. Phantom grid operational at 87% efficiency. The camera panned across the faces. Men, women, different ages, and all with the same blank expression. The video cut to black. Cade sat frozen, staring at the screen. This wasn't surveillance. This was control. Mind control. His father had been right. Vanguard wasn't building a security system. They were building a weapon. Cade clicked through more files, emails between executives, financial transfers to offshore accounts, lists of test locations. And then he found it. An email thread. The sender, Victor Ashford, CEO, Vanguard Systems Corporation. The recipient, Owen Harrian. The date, March 13th, 2019, 2 days before his father died. Cade opened it. Owen, I'm asking you one last time. Walk away from this. Take the severance package. Forget what you saw. This technology will save American lives. You're looking at it the wrong way. His father's response was short. Victor, you're using it on civilians. Without consent. Without oversight. That's not security, that's tyranny. I'm going to the FBI. I'm going to the press. This ends now. I'm sorry it had to be this way. Victor's reply came 2 hours later. Then I'm sorry, too, old friend. I really am. That was the last message. Cade stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. Victor Ashford had killed his father. Or ordered it done. And now Cade had proof. He looked at the clock on the computer. 4:30 in the morning. He'd been here for hours. Cade opened a browser, typed FBI Seattle Field Office. An address appeared. 1110 3rd Avenue, Seattle. That was 2 hours away by bus. If he had money for a bus, which he didn't. But there was another way. Cade created a new email account under a fake name. Then he started uploading files from the drive. The progress bar crawled forward. 1%, 2%. While it uploaded, Cade opened another tab and searched for major news outlets. Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, WikiLeaks. He found their tip submission forms. One by one, he started uploading the same files. It took hours. The sky outside was starting to lighten by the time he finished. But he'd done it. The evidence was out there now. Sent to the FBI, sent to journalists, sent to whistleblower organizations. Within hours, maybe less, the world would know what Vanguard had done. Cade logged out, wiped down the keyboard and mouse with his shirt, and pulled the drive from the computer. He stood up, his body stiff from sitting so long. And that's when he heard it, the sound of a car pulling up outside, engine idling. Cade moved to the window and looked out carefully. A black SUV, parked directly in front of the library. His blood ran cold. They'd found him. The front doors of the SUV opened. 2 men stepped out. Cade didn't wait. He ran, through the library, back to the window he'd come through. He climbed out, dropped to the ground, and sprinted into the alley. Behind him, he heard voices, shouting. He's here. Back exit. Cade ran harder. The alley opened onto a side street. He turned left and kept going. Dawn was breaking now, the sky turning gray. A few early morning commuters were starting to appear. Cade slowed his pace, tried to blend in. Just another kid walking to school. But his heart was still hammering. He walked for blocks, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. No one followed. Finally, when he was sure he'd lost them, he stopped. He was in a different part of the city now. Commercial district, coffee shops opening, people in suits heading to work. Normal life, like nothing was wrong. Cade found a bench and sat down. He pulled out the drive and looked at it one more time. Then he smiled, a small, tired smile. It was done. The truth was out, and there was nothing Victor Ashford could do to stop it now. The news broke at 7:32 in the morning. Cade saw it on the screen of a television in a coffee shop window. He'd been walking for hours, staying off main streets, keeping his head down. But when he saw the headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen, he stopped. Vanguard Systems under federal investigation. Classified project leaked. Cade stood there staring through the glass. It had worked. The evidence he'd uploaded, the files, the videos. Someone had taken them seriously. The news anchor was talking, but Cade couldn't hear through the window. He could only read the text scrolling beneath her face. FBI raids Vanguard Systems headquarters. CEO Victor Ashford, under investigation for illegal surveillance program. Cade felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been wound tight for days. They believed it. The proof his father had died protecting was finally seeing daylight. But Cade knew better than to celebrate yet. Victor Ashford was powerful, connected, rich. Men like that didn't go down easy. and they didn't forget the people who put them there. Cade kept walking. He needed to stay invisible, at least for a little while longer, until this was truly over. He found an old park a few blocks away, empty except for a man sleeping on a bench and a woman walking her dog. Cade sat down on the grass, his back against a tree, and closed his eyes. He hadn't slept in almost 2 days, but even now, exhausted and alone, he couldn't quite relax, because he knew they were still looking for him. Cade must have dozed off, because when he opened his eyes again, the sun was higher. The park was busier. Families, joggers, people living normal lives. He needed to charge his phone, needed to figure out his next move. But before he could stand up, someone sat down next to him. Cade tensed. He turned his head slowly. It was a woman, late 40s, professional clothes, short dark hair, calm eyes. She didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead at the park. "Cade Harrian," she said quietly. Cade's blood ran cold. He started to stand, but she held up a hand. "Relax, I'm not here to hurt you." "Who are you?" She reached into her jacket slowly, pulled out a badge. "FBI Agent Catherine Webb." Cade stared at the badge, then at her face. "You're the one my father trusted." She nodded. "Owen was a good man, a brave man. I'm sorry I couldn't protect him." Cade didn't say anything. Webb put the badge away. "I got your files early this morning, along with about 50 other agencies and news outlets." She smiled slightly. "You made quite the splash." "Is it real?" Cade asked. "The investigation?" "Very real. We raided Vanguard's headquarters 3 hours ago, seized servers, documents, equipment, and we arrested Victor Ashford." Cade exhaled. "Is he going to prison?" "If the evidence holds up, yes, for a very long time." "It'll hold up," Cade said. "It's all there, everything my father collected." Webb looked at him for the first time. "He planned this, didn't he, hiding the RV, the drive, leaving it for you?" "I think so. He must have known they'd come for him, and he wanted to make sure the truth survived, even if he didn't." Cade felt his throat tighten. Webb was quiet for a moment, then she spoke again. "You did what he couldn't, Cade. You finished it. That takes courage." "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice. You could have walked away, taken the RV, and disappeared. But you didn't." Cade looked down at his hands. "He was my dad. I couldn't just let it go." Webb nodded. "No, I don't suppose you could." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the park around them, kids laughing, dogs barking, normal life. Finally, Webb stood up. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." Cade hesitated. "Where?" "FBI field office. We need your statement, and we need to make sure you're protected until this is over." "Am I in trouble for breaking into the library?" Webb smiled. "Think we can overlook that, given the circumstances." Cade stood up slowly. His legs were stiff. His whole body ached. "What happens after I give my statement?" "That's up to you. You're 17. Legally, we'd need to contact your mother." "No," the word came out harder than Cade intended. Webb studied him. "She kicked you out?" "Yeah. Then we'll figure something else out. There are programs, resources. You won't be on the street." Cade followed her to an unmarked car parked at the edge of the park. As they drove, he stared out the window, watching the city pass by. For the first time in a week, he wasn't running. For the first time in 7 years, he felt like maybe things could actually be okay. The FBI field office was downtown, a tall, gray building with no signs, just an address. Webb led Cade through security up an elevator and into a small conference room. "Wait here," she said. "I'll be right back." Cade sat down at the table. The room was plain, white walls, no windows, a camera in the corner. He waited. 10 minutes later, Webb returned with another agent, younger, male, carrying a laptop. "This is Agent Morris. He's going to take your statement." Cade nodded. Morris set up the laptop and opened a recording program. "Just tell us everything," he said. "Start from the beginning." So Cade did. He told them about being kicked out, about buying the RV for $10, about finding the locked door in the papers with his father's name. He told them about going to Vanguard, seeing Victor Ashford, that cold smile through the window. He told them about breaking into the hidden compartment, his father's letter, the drive, the encryption. And he told them about running, hiding, uploading the files in the middle of the night. Morris typed everything, stopped occasionally to ask questions. It took 2 hours. When Cade finally finished, his throat was dry, his voice hoarse. Webb slid a bottle of water across the table. You did good, Cade. Morris closed his laptop. This corroborates everything we found in the raid. The timeline, the project details, Ashford's involvement. So it's over? Cade asked. Webb and Morris exchanged a look. The investigation is just beginning, Webb said carefully. But the hardest part is done. We have the evidence. We have Ashford in custody. Now it's just a matter of building the case. Will I have to testify? Probably if it goes to trial. Cade nodded slowly. Okay. Webb stood up. Come on, let's get you some food and a place to sleep. She led Cade to a break room, got him a sandwich and chips from a vending machine. Cade ate slowly, realizing how hungry he actually was. What about the people, he asked between bites. The ones they tested on. Are they okay? Webb's expression darkened. We're still tracking them down. Most don't even know they were part of the experiment. Vanguard was careful. They used brief exposures. In public places, the effects were temporary. But they're okay. Physically, yes, but we'll be monitoring them, and Vanguard will be paying for what they did. Cade finished the sandwich. What happens to me now? Webb sat down across from him. Like I said, there are programs, foster care, group homes. You're 17, so in less than a year, you'll age out anyway. But until then, we'll make sure you're taken care of. I don't want foster care. Then what do you want? Cade thought about it. I want to finish high school, get my diploma, maybe go to college. That's possible. There's money too. What money? Whistleblower protections, compensation. The government has programs for people who expose illegal activity. You'll likely qualify. Cade hadn't thought about that. How much? Could be $50,000, could be more. Depends on the case. $50,000. More money than Cade had ever imagined having. That's enough to start over, he said quietly. Yes, it is. Webb stood up. For now, you'll stay in protective custody. Just a few days, until we're sure Vanguard's people aren't looking for you anymore. Cade nodded. She led him down another hallway to a small room. A bed, a desk, a bathroom. It's not much, but it's safe. It's perfect. Webb handed him a key. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. She left. Cade stood in the middle of the room for a long moment. Then he sat down on the bed. It was soft, clean. He lay back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in over a week, he felt safe. And for the first time in 7 years, he felt like he'd done something that mattered. He closed his eyes, and finally he slept. Cade woke to knocking on the door. He sat up disoriented. The room was dark except for a thin line of light under the door. How long had he been asleep? The knocking came again. Cade, you awake? Webb's voice. Yeah, come in. The door opened. Webb stepped inside and flipped on the light. Cade squinted. What time is it? 6 p.m. You've been out for almost 8 hours. Cade rubbed his face. Sorry. Don't be. You needed it. She handed him a bag. Clean clothes, toiletries. Figured you could use them. Cade took the bag. Thanks. There's a shower down the hall. Take your time, then meet me in the break room. Cade showered for the first time in days. The hot water felt like a luxury. He put on the clean clothes, jeans, a plain t-shirt, socks, everything fit. When he got to the break room, Webb was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a pizza box. Hope you like pepperoni. Cade sat down and grabbed a slice. I like anything right now. Webb smiled. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Webb spoke. I have an update. Thought you'd want to know. Cade looked up. Victor Ashford is being arraigned tomorrow morning. The charges are significant. Illegal surveillance, human experimentation, conspiracy, and murder. Murder. Your father's death. We reopened the case. Found evidence that the car accident was staged. Brake lines cut. Ashford gave the order. Cade set down his pizza. So it's real. He really killed him. Yes, and we can prove it. Cade felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. Good. Webb reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I also wanted to give you this. Cade took it, unfolded it. It was a printout of an article from the Washington Post. The headline read, "Whistleblower exposes illegal mind control program. FBI arrests Vanguard Systems CEO." Below it was a photo, Victor Ashford, in handcuffs, being led out of the Vanguard building. Cade stared at it. "They're calling you a hero," Webb said. "They don't know your name yet, but they will, eventually." "I'm not a hero. You exposed one of the most dangerous illegal programs in modern history. You brought down a corporation that was experimenting on American civilians. You got justice for your father. That sounds like a hero to me." Cade didn't know what to say. Webb stood up. "You have a choice to make, Cade. You can go public. Tell your story. There will be interviews. Tension. Some people will want to make you famous. Or, or you stay anonymous, let the evidence speak for itself. Live a quiet life." Cade thought about it. Fame, attention, none of that sounded appealing. "I want to stay anonymous." Webb nodded. "Smart choice. I'll make sure your name stays out of it for as long as possible." She headed toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. We found the old man, the one who sold you the RV." Cade sat up straighter. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. His name is Earl Dixon. Turns out he used to work for Vanguard too, in maintenance. He knew your father." "He knew him, yeah. Owen asked him to hold on to the RV, told him that someday his son might need it. Paid him $5,000 to keep it safe." Cade's throat tightened. "My dad planned all of this." "He did. He knew he was in danger, and he made sure you'd have what you needed, even if he couldn't be there to give it to you himself." Cade looked down at his hands. "Can I meet him, Earl?" "If you want, I can arrange it." "Yeah, I'd like that." Webb smiled. "I'll set it up." She left. Cade sat alone in the break room staring at the article. His father had planned everything. The RV, the drive, the evidence. He'd known he was going to die, and he'd made sure Cade would be able to finish what he started. Even from beyond the grave, Owen Harrigan had protected his son. Cade folded the article and put it in his pocket. Then he stood up and walked back to his room. Tomorrow he'd meet Earl. He'd hear the full story. But tonight he just wanted to rest. 2 days later, Webb drove Cade to a small diner on the edge of the city. Earl Dixon was already there, sitting in a booth near the window, coffee in front of him. He looked older than Cade remembered, tired. But when he saw Cade walk in, his face softened. Cade slid into the booth across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Earl smiled. "You found it." "Yeah." "Good, that's good." Webb excused herself, giving them privacy. Earl took a sip of his coffee. "Your dad was a good man, Cade. Best engineer I ever knew. And a better father." "You knew him well." "Worked with him for 3 years. He talked about you all the time. Showed me pictures, told me stories." Cade felt his chest tighten. "Why didn't you tell me when I bought the RV?" Earl looked down at his coffee. "Because I didn't know if you were ready, if you'd find the door, if you'd figure it out. Your dad said if you were meant to, you would." "He told you all this?" "Yeah, about 2 weeks before he died. He came to me, said things were getting dangerous, said he needed someone to hold on to the RV, keep it safe, and if anything happened to him, I was supposed to make sure you got it." "Why didn't you just give it to me?" "Because Owen said you had to find it on your own. Said if I just handed it to you, you wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe it. But if you found it yourself, if you worked for it, you'd know it was real." Cade shook his head. He really thought of everything. "He loved you, kid. Everything he did to protect you." They sat in silence for a while. Then Earl reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "He left this for you, too. Told me to give it to you if you ever came looking." Cade took the envelope, his hands shaking. His name was written on the front, in his father's handwriting. He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a photograph. Cade pulled out the photo first. It was him and his father at a park. Cade was maybe 8 years old. His father had his arm around him. Both of them were smiling. Cade didn't remember the day, but he remembered the feeling, safe, loved. He set the photo down and unfolded the letter. "Cade, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see you grow up. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from all of this. But I need you to know something. You are stronger than you think, braver than you know, and you will get through this. Whatever happens, don't give up. Don't let them win. Finish what I started. And when it's done, live your life. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. I love you, son. Always, Dad. Cade read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. He looked up at Earl. Thank you for keeping it safe. Earl nodded. He'd be proud of you, you know, what you did. I hope so. They talked for another hour. Earl told him stories about Owen, about the projects they'd worked on, the jokes they'd shared. By the time Cade left the diner, he felt like he'd gotten a piece of his father back. The weeks that followed were a blur of testimony and legal proceedings. Cade stayed in protective custody while the case against Victor Ashford was built. The evidence was overwhelming. The videos, the emails, the financial records. Owen's murder investigation reopened with new forensic analysis proving sabotage. Victor Ashford's lawyers tried everything. Delays, motions, challenges to the evidence. But it didn't matter. The proof was ironclad. 6 weeks after his arrest, Victor Ashford was formally charged with 47 counts, including first-degree murder. The trial would take months, but everyone knew how it would end. During this time, Webb worked with Cade on his future. The whistleblower compensation came through. $75,000. More money than Cade had ever imagined. He used part of it to enroll in a GED program. He passed in 3 months. Then he applied to community college. He was accepted. He rented a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was his. Clean, safe, quiet, and for the first time in his life, he had a future that felt real. One afternoon, about 3 months after everything started, Cade drove out to the cemetery. He'd never visited his father's grave before. His mother had taken him to the funeral, but after that, she never went back. And neither did Cade, but now he needed to. The cemetery was quiet, rows of headstones stretching across green grass. Cade found his father's grave near the back. Simple, a flat stone marker. Owen Harrian, 1977 to 2019. Beloved father. Cade stood there for a long moment. Then he knelt down and placed 3 things on the headstone. The photograph from Earl, him and his father, smiling. The letter his father had written, and the USB drive, empty now. Its contents delivered to the world. I finished it, Dad, Cade said quietly. It's over. The wind rustled through the trees. Cade stayed there for a while, not crying, not sad, just peaceful. I'm going to be okay, he said. I promise, I'm going to do what you said. Live my life. Be happy. He stood up slowly. Thank you for everything, for planning all of this, for trusting me, for giving me a chance. He took one last look at the grave, then he turned and walked away. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. But Cade didn't feel sad. He felt free. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from something. He was walking towards something, a future, a life, a chance. His father had given him that, and Cade wasn't going to waste it. 6 months after his arrest, Victor Ashford's trial ended. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cade wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He watched it on the news from his apartment, but later that day he went to the courthouse. News crews were everywhere. Cameras, reporters, prosecutors giving statements. Cade stood at the edge of the crowd watching. Nobody noticed the 18-year-old kid in jeans and a t-shirt, and that was fine with him. He'd never wanted to be famous. He just wanted the truth to come out. And it had. Cade turned and walked away from the courthouse. The city stretched out before him. Busy, alive, full of possibility. He had a class to get to, a paper to write, a life to build. He was no longer the kid who'd been kicked out in the rain with nothing but $10. He was Cade Harrian, son of Owen Harrian, the man who'd exposed one of the biggest conspiracies in modern history, the man who'd finished what his father started. And now finally he could start writing his own story. As Cade walked through the city, he thought about everything that had happened. The RV, the door, the drive. His father had planned it all, 7 years in advance, knowing he might not survive, but making sure the truth would. And he'd trusted Cade to find it, to understand it, to finish it. That trust meant everything. Cade pulled out the photograph, the one from the park, him and his father, smiling. He looked at it for a long moment, then he smiled back. Thanks, Dad. He put the photo away and kept walking, toward the future, toward the life his father had died protecting, toward home. But there was one more thing Cade needed to do, one conversation he'd been avoiding. 3 weeks after the verdict, Cade received a letter. The return address was his old house, his mother's house. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page, his mother's handwriting. Cade, I saw the news about Vanguard, about your father, about what you did. I didn't know about any of it. Owen never told me what he was working on, and I never asked. I should have. I'm sorry for that and for everything else, for not standing up for you, for choosing Dwight over you, for closing the door that night. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. What you did took courage. Your father would be proud too. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Mom. Cade read it 3 times. Then he folded it and put it in his desk drawer. He didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe someday he would. Maybe someday he'd be ready to have that conversation. But not today. Today he had other things to focus on. His classes, his apartment, his future. The wound his mother had left was still too fresh, and Cade had learned something important over the past few months. Forgiveness wasn't something you owed anyone. It was something you gave when you were ready. And he wasn't ready yet, but he kept the letter, just in case. Spring came to Spokane. Cade finished his first semester of community college with a 3.8 GPA. He'd made a few friends, not many, but good ones. People who didn't know about Vanguard, who didn't know about his father, who just knew him as Cade, the quiet guy in the back row who always did his homework. And that was exactly how he wanted it. One Saturday morning, Cade got a call from Agent Webb. How are you doing? She asked. Good, really good. I'm glad to hear it. Listen, I wanted to let you know the last of the Phantom Grid test subjects have been identified and notified. We're setting up a compensation fund, medical monitoring, counseling services. That's good. It's because of you, Cade. None of this would have happened if you hadn't come forward. I just finished what my dad started. Maybe, but it still took courage. Don't sell yourself short. They talked for a few more minutes. Then Webb said something that surprised him. I know you want to stay anonymous, and we've honored that, but there are people out there who want to thank you. Families of the test subjects, other whistleblowers, people who were inspired by what you did. I don't need thanks. I know, but sometimes it helps to know that what you did mattered, that it changed lives. Cade thought about it. Maybe someday, he said, but not yet. Fair enough, you know where to find me if you change your mind. After they hung up, Cade sat on his apartment balcony looking out at the city. Webb was right. What he'd done had mattered. Lives had been changed. A dangerous weapon had been stopped. His father's death hadn't been in vain, and maybe that was enough. Cade went back inside and pulled out his textbook. He had an exam on Monday. Life went on, and for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. The RV sat in an impound lot for months after the investigation concluded. The FBI had offered to return it to Cade, but he declined. Donate it, he'd told Webb, to someone who needs it, someone like me. She'd smiled. Your father would have liked that. A few weeks later, Webb called to tell him the RV had been given to a local homeless shelter. They'd fixed it up, made it livable, and given it to a family that had been living in their car. Cade liked that. The idea that something that had saved him was now saving someone else. It felt right, like the RV had one more mission, one more person to help, and maybe in some small way his father's plan was still working, still protecting people, still making a difference. On the 1-year anniversary of his father's death, Cade went back to the cemetery. This time he brought flowers and a new photo. It was his college ID from community college, smiling, clean, hopeful. He placed it next to the old photograph on the headstone. I'm doing okay, Dad, he said. Better than okay, actually. I'm in school. I have an apartment. I'm making it work. He sat down on the grass. I think about you every day, about what you did, about how you planned everything, how you trusted me to figure it out. The wind rustled the trees. I miss you. I wish you were here to see this, to see me. But I understand why you did what you did. And I'm grateful for the chance you gave me, for the truth you protected, for everything. Cade stayed for a long time, not talking, just sitting, being present. Finally, he stood up. I'll come back, he said, and I'll keep making you proud. I promise. He walked back to his car. The sun was shining, birds were singing, life was happening all around him, and Cade was part of it. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, just as Cade, a kid who'd been given a second chance, and who was determined not to waste it. He drove home, parked, walked up to his apartment. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd left it. Small, simple, but his. Cade sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. He had a paper to write on ethics and technology. The professor had given them free rein to choose their topic. Cade knew exactly what he was going to write about. Surveillance, privacy, the line between security and control. He smiled. Some things it seemed were inevitable, but this time he wasn't scared. He wasn't running. He was ready. Cade Harrian started typing, and as the words flowed, he felt his father with him, guiding him, protecting him, believing in him, just like always. The end.